With the release of Fast 10, we now have a whopping 11 movies in this franchise. And guess how many of them I saw for the first time within the last week? 11. Yeah, I'm still recovering. But I thought to myself, what better time than right now to rank all of these bad boys from worst to best? So let's jump right into this, starting with my pick for number 11, which is Fast and Furious. And I feel like if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times, that the biggest insult I can give a film is saying it's either boring or forgettable. Now, this movie definitely isn't boring. It has its exciting bits, but man, if you gave me a pop quiz even 20 minutes after the credits rolled for this one about what the hell it was about, I would flunk the shit out of that. Dom wants to get revenge on Letty's killer. Brian wants to rise through the ranks of the FBI, so they team up to take down a drug cartel in Mexico. That's all I've got. I think out of all of the movies in this franchise, this is the one that takes itself too seriously to the point that you're laughing at it and not laughing with it, which obviously is never a good thing. Now, don't get me wrong, like I said, there are parts in this movie I enjoy. I really dig that opening mobile heist scene where they're stealing gas off a moving tanker truck. It's fast, it's loud, it's ridiculous, exactly how I expected this franchise to be. The silver lining of this movie is that it really establishes the Toretto family dynamic that these movies have become known for, and it sets up the best couple of entries in the franchise. Also, I don't know what kind of blackmail Pitbull has on Vin Diesel, but my god, I think 80% of this soundtrack was Mr. 305. Coming in at number 10 is The Fate of the Furious, and I feel like what they went with here is one of those ideas that worked way better on paper than it did in an actual movie, flipping the entire franchise on its head, taking the main character and making him be the bad guy this time around. That takes some serious balls, and I have to give them props for going through with it. But at the end of the day, it just made the movie way more messy for me. Other than the stunts, people watch these movies for the characters. So if you're gonna take Dom out of the equation and add the fact that this is the first entry without Paul Walker in it, I mean, this crew has absolutely no one to rally behind. They're all running around like chickens with their heads cut off. On the flip side though, that Hobbs and Shaw dynamic really shines in this movie, and that third act is entertaining as all hell, despite being some of the most ridiculous shit ever, even for this franchise. I mean, The Rock uses his bare hands to redirect a torpedo into an armored convoy. Who needs logic when you've got family, am I right? Coming in at number 9 is F9, and this is basically a superhero movie. After Tokyo Drift, none of these films even remotely try to be grounded or realistic, but this one really goes above and beyond to throw all that shit out the window. I mean, you have people going to outer space, using cars to break their falls at high speeds, coming back from certain death. There are people in this movie that are hopping from car to car effortlessly like they're frogs on a lily pad. It's a lot to take in. What makes this one sting more is that I thought the themes were pretty good. I mean, it's become a meme at this point, just how much Dominic Toretto loves family and that you never turn your back on family. So seeing him do just that to his own brother created an interesting dynamic, but man, there is just so much backstory and exposition in here. I actually liked learning about all of that stuff. But seeing that all jutted in here in between the action, it just really messed with the pace. Coming in at number 8 is Too Fast, Too Furious, and I feel like this film really suffers from not having Dom and the rest of his family in the mix here. Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson, they have decent enough chemistry, but the whole time I was watching it, I was thinking to myself that I would rather see Vin Diesel slotted in there instead. For the most part, I feel like this movie was designed just to follow the beats of the first film and just up the ante and double the action, and I will say, from an action standpoint, this movie definitely succeeds. The only problem is that all of the best parts happen in the last 20 minutes of the movie. I mean, you have a fake out chase scene that's right out of Baby Driver, you have guys using ejector seats to throw people out of their passenger window, and you have a car jumping over a lake to crash land onto the top of a yacht. It can't put all of the pieces together, but it definitely has its moments. Coming in at number 7 is Fast 10, and this movie does everything it can to try and get the franchise back on track and remind you why you like the tone of 5, 6, and 7 in the first place. No one's going to outer space, no one's throwing any torpedoes around, and thank God for that. You can tell they approached the action in a way that would satisfy every type of Fast fan, whether you prefer the gritty and realistic racing tone of the first 3 films, or if you're all in on the big and loud macho heist storylines the series has moved on to. The big problem is that they've accumulated such a massive amount of characters now that balancing them all out has become near impossible. Like, there are definitely characters in the movie I wish we spent more time with, and there are definitely characters in the movie I wish we spent way less time with. I also just feel like they're harder to connect with this time around because there's so many of them and they're all split off into a ton of different locations. It's still as messy and cheesy as ever, and it doesn't know if it wants to fully embrace its balls to the wall bonkers nature or keep a dramatic tone, but it does a fine job brushing off the rust a bit. Also, how do you not make the tagline Fast 10 your seatbelts? What a wasted opportunity. Coming in at number 6 is Fast and Furious 6, and I think a lot of the stuff that The Fate of the Furious did poorly, this movie actually does pretty well, because this time around, Letty is going up against the Toretto family, and since she's a side character and not the leader of the group, that dynamic ends up being pretty entertaining. And seeing our main characters having to go up against this team that's basically composed of evil versions of themselves creates some worthwhile moments. I'm also a big Luke Evans fan. I don't think he gets enough credit, and he is solid as he always is as the villain in this movie. There's definitely some goofy moments in here though, like Dom purposely crashing his car into the overpass guardrail to propel himself forward to catch Letty in midair, or how that plane in the finale must have been on the longest runway in human history for them to have enough time to pull off that job, are just a couple of moments that will make your brain hurt if you think about them too hard. It's definitely a fun entry. The franchise has seen way worse, and I feel like you could make the case that I'm a little extra hard on this one just because it's the movie that precedes the absolute beast that is Fast 5. Coming in at number 5 is The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, and this movie is definitely the most detached from the main franchise, but that's exactly why I like it. It's a completely new location to us. We've never met these characters before, and it's a brand new style of racing. I feel like a lot of this movie's flaws can be forgiven because they gave us the character of Han. That is a top 3 character for me in these movies. Clearly the writers think so too because they completely altered the timeline of the franchise just to bring him back to life. On the flip side though, I thought it was kind of a bizarre decision to make the main character in a movie about driving a legitimately terrible driver. Like, he can't stay on the road, he's always crashing into shit. I understand they wanted to give him a bit of a Rocky montage so you saw him getting better and better, but there's just no way he could have figured it out that fast. This movie is just a nice change of pace when you look at it in the scheme of the franchise. Also, you gotta love that Dom Toretto cameo at the end, setting up bigger and better things coming down the pipe. Coming in at number 4 is Hobbs and Shaw, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty surprised by how much I liked this one. The franchise was clearly on a path where all they were focused on was getting more and more ridiculous and trying to outdo what they did in past entries, and getting further away from what made that string of 5, 6, and 7 so good, so I did not have high hopes for this one, and then it went and just smacked me right in the face. The Rock and Jason Statham play off each other really well, and Idris Elba is just the icing on the cake. It's super stylish, it's really funny, the action is entertaining. I was like, what is going on here? And then I somehow saw they got David Leitch to direct this thing. The guy behind John Wick, Atomic Blonde, Bullet Train, Deadpool 2. How did they get a hold of this man? Someone must have his family held hostage or something, I don't know, but this one was a massive surprise. Coming in at number 3 is Furious 7, and I think this movie brings the franchise to the highest point of ridiculousness it can get to that won't leave you rolling your eyes. Like, this one somehow still works, but barely. Does a supercar driving off the 50th floor of a skyscraper into 2 other skyscrapers sound dumb on paper? It sure does, but boy does it play well on screen. We're fully introduced to 2 of the more interesting characters in this franchise, played by Kurt Russell and Jason Statham, 2 guys that have proven time and time again that they have the secret sauce when it comes to making good action movies. But hey, I'll be the first one to admit that this movie definitely has some conflicting ideas in here. They clearly couldn't decide if they wanted to make a revenge tale or a spy movie, so they just said, all right, screw it, let's just do both. But it's still a fun time. And obviously, it's probably the only movie in the entire franchise that I would ever describe as emotional, just because of that ending that plays out as a tribute to the late Paul Walker. Coming in at number 2 is The Fast and the Furious, the movie that started it all. This is probably the only entry in the entire franchise where you can use the word realistic to describe it and you won't get yourself laughed out of the building, but it's absolutely hysterical looking at where the franchise is now and thinking back that this first movie was a semi-grounded crime drama cat and mouse story. This film is such a time capsule for the period it was released in. The hilarious nu metal music, the cringeworthy slang, the tiny gas station sunglasses. It's all in here and is a big reason of why this movie is so entertaining. And I'm a big fan of the actual racing sequences in this movie too. They're simple but super effective. And more importantly, we get to see where the Dom and Brian bromance all began. Who would have thought that a poor man's Point Break would kick off this 11-movie franchise? Not me. Coming in at number 1 is Fast 5. Come on, did you really think it was going to be anything else? In my opinion, this is where the franchise perfectly hits that sweet spot of everything they were really going for. The stunts are just the right amount of ridiculous, it finally embraces that self-aware, goofy tone, and it gives us some of the best sequences of the whole franchise. That scene where the entire bank vault is being pulled by cars through the streets of Rio de Janeiro, I mean, that's one of the defining action movie moments of the 2010s. Another reason this movie works really well is because The Rock is used exactly how I want him to be used. His role is perfect for this type of action film. He wasn't too massive of a star yet, he didn't always need to be the central character or the good guy, and it makes him work so much better as the antagonist for Toretto and his team. Even though I hadn't seen any of these movies before a week ago, I had obviously heard the buzz that this was the best entry of the entire franchise because it feels like you just took the Fast Saga and threw it into a blender with Ocean's 11, and that really is the best way to describe this movie. This is just a well-oiled machine of a big-budget action blockbuster. So there you have it, guys, my ranking of all 11 movies in the Fast and Furious franchise. So now you know my list, but I want to know yours. Let me know in the comments below, how would you rank this entire franchise? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.